Hey, Ryan. Ooh.
Big echo.
Ryan? Ooh, Ryan.
Hey, Guido.
Hey. Oh. Hello?
It's really good light.
Laptop.
Because they carry the right.
We can have it, right?
That one's not muted. Yeah, it's not nice. Get a new guy.
Hey
Ryan, can you hear me from the microphone?
Yep, I can hear you.
Perfect. And you want to try to share just in case my presentation goes kaput?
Sure, you want me to put it up real quick?
Yeah, I have it, but just in case, just, always trying to be redundant. Just in case.
Let me try real quick. How does that look?
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
You can take yours down. All right. So just sit tight and mute yourself, shut off your video for about 20 minutes. And then,
Sounds good.
all right. Sounds good, man.
Dave, is that you? We hear you. But it sounded pretty bad, actually, like tinny. I can, Dave. Can you hear me? Yes, Dave. I hear you in the chamber. But it sounds pretty bad, like very tinny. Yeah, he was checking him in. That was, I don't know.
So I've even seen that in public hearings where like a community member will say something that is completely false.
Right.
And then a couple council members will gravitate to that.
Right.
And then you spend an hour trying to be polite and be like, and then, but you're trying to be polite because you don't want to directly come out and say, oh, I think what that person said is completely fabricated.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, well, actually, I have a different perspective on that. Or actually, no, I don't really. And then eventually, hopefully, it comes out that what that person said is actually not true.
Yeah.
But then it usually takes like a good, like several. Oh, well, actually, let me show you. so, so right, right. Anyway, so that kind of like in the public meetings, it's always very fascinating to me where it's like we're the technocrat, the factoid people, and we have to sit there and go, oh well, I can hear you through your phone. Sure.
Hello. Is this working?
But he's not going to be accurate until we shut him off. And you can hear me, right? All righty, sounds good.
Are we good, Dave?
We're good? That's why we get here early. Awesome. Sure. Chair Amadeo. Vice Chair Woodson. Commissioner Herr. Commissioner Rana. Commissioner St. John. Commissioner Walton. Here. Commissioner Jacobson.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And if commissioners, if it hadn't been for Commissioner Walton, I would have forgotten, but we need to have our microphones on when we speak. And I didn't have mine on. So. Okay, so if we can have a moment of silence and would someone volunteer to lead us in the pledge? And all right, Commissioner St. John is going to lead us in the pledge.
For our moment of silence, I would like to propose that it's in remembrance of the 5-man crew of the Ocean Gate submersible Titan.
That would be appropriate.
Following that. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to special announcements and communications from the floor. We have 3 members of the public here. Would any of you like to come up and speak about anything of interest to the community that is not on the agenda? And nobody's coming up. How about commissioners? Do commissioners have any special announcements? None? Okay, we're going to move on. We have a grant letter.
We do, and we'd ask that Carlos come up to the podium right here. So in November, Carlos reached out to the mayor and the city manager and said, hey, there's a pocket of change the city has not received. And it's the PLHA money. It's a money, there's a tax on every time you record a document in the county, and it's collected. And so Carlos was nice enough to meet with me a couple times, go over our grant application, connected me to the right people. And as of the date of that letter, which I think it was April or so,
May 6th.
May, because another part of HCD certified our 5th cycle housing element, we were then eligible for the PLHA money, and Carlos connected us with the right people, so we got our $616,000. And Carlos is a Marina resident, so.
One
Of course,
moment
of course.
for the public's benefit, would you please tell us what the acronym?
Permanent local housing allocation. And it's a permanent source of affordable housing that, like I said, it's a fee that's put on every recorded document that people record at the County of Monterey. And so every year it's about 100 or so and change that we get. But because we had not had a certified housing element, it actually built up pretty substantial amount. And so, but we just wanted to publicly acknowledge Carlos, thank him. And we are going to be working to use some of that for creating pre-ADU approved plans. So if a customer comes to the front counter, if we have this pre-approved set of ADU plans, within a week or a day or however long, we'll be able to get an ADU permit out to customers very quickly. And the other part that we promised the state is we would use it potentially for first-time home buyer assistance. And I don't have all of this worked out. We're still working out the mechanics, but it's because of Carlos stepping forward. And so we just wanted to acknowledge Carlos. So
Carlos, do you have something you'd like to say? Your mic. The little button.
Oh, here we go. Sorry, first time up here. So it started with a knock at my door from, I think, one of your now city council members, Lisbeth or Lisbeth. Yeah, and I just asked, a kind of a sincere question because I was working for the state at the time. And that particular program was one that I was working with. And I just asked, and because we moved to the city and we have a vested interest, I wanted to introduce everyone to my wife. This is Dr. Christina Nuyo. She is your local Walmart pharmacist. She's a pharmacy manager here. So by all means, come get your vaccinations. Yeah, but we're both in this for the long run, and we wanted to make ourselves, introduce ourselves to the community, etc. Yeah, but it started there, and the rest is history, as Guido kind of put it. So, but we know we are here to help in whatever capacity we can. So,
Well, we thank you very much.
Of course.
And we're glad that we have community members who see something that needs to be taken care of and do it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Not a bomb.
Yes.
And the theme of the night is HCD because we're also talking about the housing element. So
There you go. Are you going to join in the conversation tonight?
he does have dinner plans. We don't want to put him to sleep. So
Okay. All right, let's move on. Next item is ex parte communication for quasi judicial matters. And I understand the city council had quite,
they
Quite an
adopted what
education.
this commission has been doing for the last year.
and I.
So this commission is actually at the forefront of doing what's right and disclosing, and the council adopted what we've been doing by practice for the last year. So thank you to the commission for setting a good example. And there was some back and forth about the language, but the language that's on the agenda is what the council adopted. So
Great. Thank you. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have the action minutes for May 25th and June 8th. So does anybody want to make a motion, or do they have any comments on either one of those?
I don't have any comments, but I'll make a motion that they pass. Approve them.
To approve them, do we have a second? Okay, so Commissioner Woodson made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Herr. All in favor? Oh, wait a minute, we have to do roll call, right?
yes,
Okay, so may I have a roll call vote?
Chair Amadeo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodson,
Yes.
Commissioner Herr, Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to the public hearing. Okay, the planning commission shall review the draft housing element and recommend that the city council forward the document to the California Department of Housing and Community Development to begin a 90-day review period. The draft document is categorically exempt from environmental review pursuant to section 15332 of the CEQA guidelines in field development. Planner is the Community Development Director, Guido Persicone. Persicone or Persicone?
Persicone, but it's okay.
Persicone, okay. So if you would like to begin the discussion.
Yes, so Ryan is from Rincon. He's the consultant helping us. And Veronica Tam is also the other consultant. She's not here tonight, but just wanted to acknowledge Ryan actually wrote this thing. I'm just summarizing what he did. So, and Ryan's here for more technical questions. So, and I'll repeat this a couple times in the presentation. So just right off the bat, this is not your only bite at the apple for this very important document. We're here to just get your input, catalog it, so we show the state that we've, gotten input from council and commission. And then when it comes back in the fall, that'll be another opportunity to provide comment. The thing before, and I'll go into this in detail. The other thing is the document is pretty dense of housing and census data. But the real meat and potatoes of this is chapter 2. Those are the programs and policies that we're basically entering into a contract with the state to say we will do this stuff. So yeah, just don't get overwhelmed. It's a pretty meaty document. So chapter 2, even after tonight, go back, reread chapter 2 at least. And then, like I said, you'll have a couple more opportunities to give us more feedback. So we'll go over what is a housing element, what is the site inventory, some new requirements for housing element law affirming fair housing, the policies within the document, which are chapter 2, and then kind of next steps. So what is a housing element? A housing element is one of the elements. So when we say element, it's just chapter of the general plan. It's just synonymous. I don't know why it's called element, but that's just the way it is. It is required to be updated by the state every 8 years. Currently, we're preparing the 6th cycle housing element. We just got 5th cycle certified, which made us eligible for the PLHA money. And the updates are done on a schedule prescribed by the state. So I live in San Jose. San Jose and the Bay Area is in the ABAG region. All of theirs had to be done by December 22nd, 2022. We're in the AMBAG region. All of these have to be done by December of this year, so December 2023. What does a housing element do? It provides an assessment of current and future housing needs. It identifies opportunities and constraints. It establishes goals, policies, and programs to meet the city's housing needs. And there are mandated updates to the zoning code to reflect changes of state law. A lot of these changes, this commission has actually already worked on in the last year. And the density bonus ordinance that this body just approved, that's another example of what this is part of housing element implementation. Why are we updating the housing element? Well, number one, it's required by state law. The deadline for adoption is December of this year, which we'll go into a little more detail. Some more punitive stuff that I won't focus on. If you do have a non-compliant housing element, you're not eligible for certain grants. Now that we have a 5th cycle housing element, Brian from Public Works can now get more state and federal money to improve your roads. And then also, if you don't have a valid housing element, some of your local land use control can be challenged and some of your local land use authority can be taken away. So that's all part of this too, but we won't focus on that. So there's been a lot that's been going on since we got the contract with WinCon last year. We did have a study session with this body in November. We had a community workshop in November, November 10th, the same day. We did an affirming fair housing workshop. We've been doing a series of stakeholder interviews, and there's been a housing survey that's been prepared. So one part of the housing element is the site inventory. And in summary, we just have to prove to the state that we have adequate capacity to meet our regional housing goals. It's a required component of the housing element. The RENA number is prepared by AMBAG. You'll hear that term. AMBAG is our local council of governments, basically the regional government agency. Don't ask me how they come up with the number. It goes into the sausage making machine. There's a huge methodology. The gist of it is Marina is very fortunate. Our number is actually very low. It's only 685. I just left Los Altos where the number had quadrupled. And there was very much concern. I think there's a recognition that we are actually building housing here, that we are affirming fair housing by spreading units throughout the city, and that we are being a fair regional player. So I'm sure that played a factor. So as you can see on the screen, our RENA number, if you hear that term, is 685. That's what we have to prove that we have adequate capacity to meet. And they added the no net loss provisions to state law. There has to be a little bit of a buffer. So with a 20% buffer, we have to show we have about 821 units, but our real RENA number is 685. And the buffer is just there to make sure that if 1 or 2 parcels somehow don't get developed, that your whole thing doesn't get denied. So you have a little bit of buffer in your RENA allocation. So the site inventory shows projects that are under review, have been approved, or got building permits. The state wants us to show what our ADU trends are. We want to be able to show sites that are vacant and non-vacant and have the potential for development for housing. They want to make sure, the state wants to make sure that the sites that are chosen are really valid sites that you really can build housing on. There were some agencies down in San Diego area who were trying to basically designate swampland as housing. And there were some other shenanigans that went on a couple cycles ago. So the state imposed additional standards to basically say cities, you have to really demonstrate it's a legitimate site. So you can't have it to be a major flood zone. You can't be the site of major erosion, or, you can't have it on properties with a 30% slope, right? So this is basically the state having to step in because, some cities were not being fair actors in this process. The other thing it has to show is there has to be a sufficient density. For our baseline density is about 20 units per acre. Up in the Bay Area, most of the cities are 30 units per acre. The other thing is the site has to be of adequate size, anywhere from half an acre to 10 acres. If it's less than half acre or larger than 10 acres, the state will question, is this really a site that's adequate for housing? So that's the magic between 0.5 of an acre and 10 acres to make sure it's a legitimate site. So there's quite a bit of documentation, but the gist of it is because Marina has been approving quite a bit of housing, we have way more than adequate capacity to meet our RENA number. That wasn't the case in my previous city. There was going to have to be some significant rezoning of properties to meet the allocation. Here, we have adequate capacity. So that's very much a positive thing for the city and residents. In addition, this body, as well as the city council, adopted an affordable housing overlay. This was done to meet our 5th cycle obligations. And what it did is if you meet certain density ranges, and if you agree to build certain units at certain income levels, it would be a by right approval to give you a permit to build housing in the city. It's almost like an SB 35 light type of process. This body approved that last year and the council adopted it in February. So it further demonstrates we have adequate capacity. These are some of the sites. This has gone over in pretty significant detail in the document. And even with the buffer, we have pretty significant capacity. So the next piece of the housing element, and this is new to this cycle, is the affirming fair housing piece. This was AB 686, I think is the state legislation. And what the state wants us to do is demonstrate that we are taking meaningful action to overcome patterns of segregation and fostering inclusive communities. And that if we're going to be building affordable housing, that we spread them equally throughout the city, that we don't concentrate units in one part of the community. This is to break up some rather unsavory zoning practices from the early 60s, 70s, and 80s. So luckily, we are already doing this in a lot of our developments. This body approved the Sea Haven project, the 210 affordable housing units within that project. Those units will be spread throughout the project and a lot of the other developments in the city. There are other pieces to the affirming fair housing, which you can read in more detail in the document. But once again, it's really about spreading the units throughout the city and breaking up housing patterns to make it fair and equitable for all members of the community. Now we get to the meat and potatoes, and thanks, Nick. He actually provided some slides for this one. So I put this really is the meat and potatoes of the document. This is chapter 2. This is where all the policies are in the document. So these policies, so in previous cycles, cities could get away with saying, oh, I'm going to do this policy, I'm going to build more ADUs, and they would push it to the 7th or 8th year of the housing element. They adopted some new laws at the state legislature. Even though we're on an 8-year cycle, at year 4, state HCD is going to be reviewing people's housing elements. And so you'll see in the document that we have to front load a lot of the policies. A lot of the policies in here are saying we have to complete certain things by 2024, 2025, 2026. So very early on in the 8-year process. And that's just to get cities to do what they said they were promised to do early on. Because at year 4, if you're not tracking, they can impose some sanctions and really get on the city in terms of not meeting its requirements for this housing element. So I won't go through all the policies. I will point out program 2.2 talks about updating our density bonus. We've actually already done that. Program 1.4 is a potential policy to partner with the faith-based communities. There was a state bill that got adopted that said faith-based communities can build affordable housing and not have to be imposed severe parking restrictions on the affordable units. A lot of cities in the Bay Area have adopted a similar program because most faith-based properties are pretty large. So this is a policy in our draft housing element. And there's a whole host of other stuff in here, making sure that we're properly keeping up our housing, that we're doing adequate inspections of units that we own, program 5.1. Program 3.1, that we're doing adequate amendments to keep our housing element up to date with state law. So as I said earlier, this is not your only bite at the apple. We will be bringing this back to this body and to the city council. Really, the focus of today is to get input from the community and the commission, and Ryan and I tabulating all of these comments, and then producing that for the planning commission and council when we come back in the fall, and then showing the state that we've been doing adequate outreach and meeting with local stakeholders. And so this is the overall schedule as of June 8th. We released the housing element. There is a 30-day public comment period. We're having this meeting tonight. July 5th is the meeting with the council. From July 8th to July 21st, there's a mandated, we have 10 business days to respond to all of the comments we're going to receive at these two hearings. And then July 24th, I shipped the document up to state HCD. There is a 90-day public review period by the state. Then we'll give ourselves about a month to review the 90-day comment letter from HCD. And then we'll come back to the commission in December and hopefully in January get it adopted. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Guido. This is the time for commissioners to ask questions of staff. And I would like you to hold your comments until after we've had public comment, because this is a public hearing. So if we have any commissioners who have any questions for staff, we're going to start there. I'm not seeing any. Oh. Okay, so Commissioner Walton.
Thank you, Chair. I think so first I want to say thank you to Mr. Russell for this was a beautiful document. I didn't expect to find the beauty, if that makes any sense. It was like reading a novel about Marina and its history, if that makes any sense at all. So I want to say thank you for how well this flowed. It kept my attention and I thought I was going to fall asleep with it. I think I have a bunch of comments, but I guess my question really is with respect to prevailing wage. I want to know if it's a fair assumption to, well, I guess I want to know more about the prevailing wage and how much we're stuck with having to keep it. Okay, I guess the reason why I have the question is because the housing that has been developed on former Fort Ord is quite expensive. And I think what I read was that some of that is because of prevailing wage, and maybe that's an assumption that I'm making or misunderstood something, but I think that I read that the prevailing wage that the developers were required to pay the construction did increase the pricing in the Dunes and Sea Haven. So I'm wondering if we're stuck with that. And I think that's my only question.
Yeah, so first off, we do want to acknowledge Ryan. He spent a lot of time working on this document. I merely summarized it. Yes, thank you. I could not do this, but without his help. And the second part is prevailing wage. Yes, on all the former Fort Ord land, prevailing wage is required for first generation housing. And it is a significant constraint on housing development. And so there's a whole section of the housing element that talks about housing constraints, and that is a constraint for the city of Marina.
Is there? So first generation, that's that first 20, 30 years of the housing that's built then, and then
The
any-
first
First time.
building of the property.
of the
right?
property. And if so second generation's not required to have that. When would we have a second generation, do you think? Many years from now, 30, 50?
I mean, if you build that building and then it gets demoed, I guess that second generation would not be subject, but it's just the first,
The
whatever,
first generation.
development,
And
yeah.
we want our housing to last for a very long time, so.
Right,
Yeah, I don't think we want to build it and then demo it so we can
right, right.
have
And-
construction workers come in.
I think there's a question that goes along with that though, because of the ADUs that people might build afterwards. Is that considered first? First,
Oh, I don't know, I haven't been
build,
asked
or
that
is
question
that-
yet. That's a good question. I'll have to follow up on that.
yeah,
I'll have to follow up on that.
okay, that would be great.
Because within the dunes or Cypress Knolls or, yeah, that's a good question. I'd have to follow up on that. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
No, ma'am, that's it.
Okay, does anyone else have an, oh,
Still her, but I do.
okay, Commissioner Woodson.
So I have, it's not just like for staff, but you're here and you're and it really is, it goes back, it's a combination question for staff, but she actually may have the answer for this. And it goes back to prevailing wage. And it actually is from a development perspective on some of the open land we have that we're looking at doing future housing development on, such as an area over by the area by Walmart, that if we're putting in low income housing there, that it's not going to be under prevailing wage. But what I'm just curious, is the low income housing that is being finished in East Garrison right now that has gone up considerably in cost? Was a lot of that cost driven because of the prevailing wage, or is it a combination of prevailing wage and just the construction costs that are ongoing right now? And the reason I ask is it ties back to the thought process is if we look at Cypress Knolls and we're building out Cypress Knolls and we start looking at using that for some of our low income and meeting some of our lower threshold numbers, how does that going to play out in that development? Because that will directly impact, going back to your point, the cost of building in Cypress Knolls, because Cypress Knolls is definitely a prevailing wage area.
Yeah, so Cypress Knolls is in the former Fort Ord land. It will be subject to prevailing wage. And that was identified as a constraint by the APA committee that came and spoke to the joint body in April 7th. That is something that we do have to wrestle with, in addition to the $15 million of site remediation.
And I think
So-
the reason I'm asking more about East Garrison is that East Garrison is the only other area of former Fort Ord property right now that had a significant low-income housing area built into it. Seaside has not done that in their area. We have bits and pieces of it in our current developments, but East Garrison, I believe it would have fallen in the same guidance. It was part of old Fort Ord and it would have had to meet the prevailing wage issues when they built it. I just didn't know the answer if it did or not. So, okay.
So if you want to come speak in the microphone.
Sorry about that. Should have to speak up early. No, and
You're the
I'm literally
chief specialty.
taking
So
advantage. of the fact that
maybe
you're
maybe
standing here.
identify yourself, Dina, so
Yeah.
they don't. Turn on the mic. Turn on the
Turn
microphone.
on the mic.
Sorry, Dana.
There you go.
Okay, I think I'm good here.
Yeah.
I'm Dana Cleary. I live here in Marina and I work for Chispa. We're a developer of affordable housing. And we built the 40-unit development that's right next to the post office. It's a senior building called Junsei Oaks. And I am still struggling through to the end of building the 66 units out in East Garrison. And that the cost of prevailing wage is significant. It does make it much more difficult, really, or it makes it a giant project for which you need a lot of subsidy to be able to build it. It's hard. It adds labor cost.
Right.
The cost to buildings going on right now for everybody is materials cost and supply chain issues that add a lot of cost to building just in the last couple of years.
And I knew that part of it, and I thought it was. And again, it's just, we've got an excess of capacity, but it's not right. Our issue isn't necessarily excess capacity in Marina. It's how can we effectively or positively impact the regional area by having housing here that allows workers to reduce their commute times. And that's where I think when we look at something like, then that's why I was asking the questions, because we have this excess capacity, it's like, and we can build out. We don't, for example, necessarily have to we don't have to worry about the housing areas necessarily in Arden Ranch because our numbers are great. We are, and I think that's a good thing that we're doing. It shows that we're still making a proactive stance. But how do we continue to do that? Because I think that's my other set of questions as I was reading through the report. I should have just tabbed it. It was when we look at the excess capacity. Right now we're at. Thank you. Sorry. We're at plus 50% and plus 36% on low income and moderate income. And average income, we're so far over that standard. And that's where most of it comes from. How can we utilize that excess capacity to actually improve the quality of life, especially on the infill side? And which goes back to a lot of the city council's guidance is what can we do as we look at these numbers and we start designing a program on the commission side that we can leverage this on the infill side to actually work with developers and promote the idea that we need to take the lower income and the moderate income and really use this to benefit an area. Because the other part of it is, and you and I were talking about this before the meeting, which is the fact that we are fortunate to live where we are and we have land. And it's not just land to expand in, we have a lot of infill land that a lot of the rest of the peninsula does not have. And so if we're looking at a regional solution, then what can we do for that? So that's kind of my first question is on the excess capacities, how best can we leverage that as a commission as we look forward to this document? The second question I had, let's see.
Can I answer that one first? Because I'll forget.
Sure.
So this body did adopt the affordable housing overlay policy and the council approved it. The overlay is all infill lots. These are all lots that have been designated for infill development and at certain income levels at the low and very low specifically. So if we can get people to actually, implement the affordable housing overlay, that'll be a good way. There are programs in the document that talk about encouraging consolidation of smaller lots. That's another good way to get infill development. There is a program to further encourage ADUs. Some of the PLHA money is going to be used to have pre-approved ADU plans. I live in San Jose. If you go to San Jose, you can pick one of 10 ADU plans, and as long as you don't significantly change it, they give you your ADU permit in a day. And that's really the goal for us as well, to try to get to that. So those are some ways that we can further infill development in Marina. So,
thank you. Next question I have is, and this is one that is probably intractable, unfortunately, which is throughout the document, reading all of chapter 1 and all of the amazingly cool statistics from the census, because it actually is pretty interesting to that point. As you get into
Ryan. We have to thank Ryan for all that writing.
I do.
Thank you, Ryan.
You said don't provide comments, so but I'm going to now because you opened the door. And my comment is, and this is what I was saying earlier, that the thing I like as an engineer reading in this document, having written a lot of compliance plans over time, is that as you're reading it, it opened up a set of questions, and usually within a page or two, he answered the questions. So it was very much a lead you through the process to exactly where you got to at the end of chapter 1 as you got into chapter 2. And that is not an easy thing to do, to integrate a plan that way. So from somebody who writes compliance plans, I was very happy with that. But what it did really highlight, and which we all know in the peninsula, is the vacancy issue. And it's not just a rental vacancy issue, it's a single family owner issue. It crosses our demographics. It was very evident that it's not an elderly issue, it's not a gentrification issue. We just have less than 2.3% vacancy rate on average across the city. How can we, again, coming back to addressing this down the road, how can we take this excess capacity or ability, land, to actually try to drive a vacancy rate up that will improve the capability? And at the same time, and this is again a kind of intractable problem, you drive a vacancy rate up and pushes people out, and then landowners increase the rental price. And because they know that they can get past the constraints that the rest of the state has added in other places on how much you can increase it from year to year. And that's why we've got some of this 8 to 10% increase in rental over the last 5 years to 10 years. So again, it all comes back together of how do we take Marina and these numbers in this chapter and actually try to drive outside of just the overlay? How do we actually work towards improving this to increase that vacancy rate issue? Because that is a big driver in a lot of housing issues, but without having this negative effect. And I know, again, I'm asking you to pull out your brain cells on the advanced planning side graduate school level.
So you're asking me, how do we increase the vacancy rate, but do it in a way that doesn't genderify the community? Am I hearing the question correctly?
Yes. See, this is why you have a degree in this and I don't.
But no, is that a
Yes.
fair?
Yes, absolutely.
How do you increase vacancy without pushing people out? I don't know. I'll have to chew on that a little bit. I don't know if I can fully answer that. So.
I have one more page one. Sorry.
I'm going to let him find his.
Oh,
last
that's
question.
Last
that's why
question.
we're here. We're here to get input from the commission and the community.
Oh, actually, this actually goes back to the fifth element, and it's more just a memory jog. And it's probably because I just don't. Where were we on the fifth element of what we were supposed to have versus what we had? Because we had problems with the fifth element, and we had a very large number that we felt we couldn't meet, and now we've literally flipped 180 degrees.
Yeah, so
And I just
a
kinda
little
wanna
bit of
understand
a
this.
little bit of RENA math, just not to belabor the point, but because the city did not have a fifth cycle housing element, if we didn't take action like we did last year, the low and very low numbers were going to carry over to this cycle. So you would have had to have twice the number. You probably would have had to have rezoned, or we would have recommended. But because you adopted the overlay and we got it done within the fifth cycle, which doesn't end until December, and we got it done by January, February of this year, the overlay covered for the low and very low numbers that would have carried over to this cycle. So we are not in a penalty phase because this body and the council took decisive action. So hopefully so the 520 units that would have carried over, and then we added a 10 or 15% buffer in the affordable overlay, that is covered now. So we are good for fifth cycle in terms of site inventory, because we took action. If we had delayed it by several months, the state would have said, okay, well, that's great, Guido, you adopted this policy, but you didn't give people adequate time to actually implement it in the fifth cycle. But we took decisive action, it got approved, and now we're good for fifth cycle.
So
Sorry for the RENA math, but because the whole RENA number is like 1,300, but the low and very low were the ones that would have carried over. But those numbers were 520 of the 1,300. Hopefully that explained it. You guys have some face looked on your faces. Sorry.
So it's kind of a cumulative additive process. That what happened was we hit them because we got those numbers. We got to reset and look at the next cycle by itself instead of just saying, oh, they're going to carry this over. Plus, you're going to have what's in the new cycle.
Exactly.
Thank you. Those are my Any questions?
Okay, any other commissioners with questions? Because I don't see any lights on. Ah, okay, here we go. Commissioner St. John.
Just do a follow-up along the lines of the prevailing wage issue. If a builder were to prefabricate, or that is shop fabricate major components of a house, like the bones of it, the structure, and even the plywood siding and the flooring for the second level, and et cetera. If you shop fabricated, do you, in the shop that you hire to build these things and ship them to the site, if they are shop labor rather than field labor, can you take advantage of lowering your field labor prevailing wage? Or do you have to pay extra to a shop to bring his labor up to a field wage?
It's an interesting question. Yes, you can
Is it on?
circumvent. Is it on?
Yes, it's on.
You can circumvent that prevailing wage in your area if you're building it in the shop elsewhere. It brings up a lot of other issues. If you're building an apartment building, you know, an enormous upfront cost comes from it, a little lack of control over your quality, and you're not supporting local labor. You know, for us, we'd like to hire local. We just don't want to pay San Jose union scale, you know, and we have built many buildings that aren't prevailing wage. People are paid fairly. They're local contractors. We like that. But someday I may be going off to shop labor, as you call it, off to a manufactured housing. I sat down with one that's built many hotels. They build a lot of the hotels you see, and they build housing as well. And I just thought it was like, decide right now, put us a $2 million deposit, or we're just going to start building this Marriott. You know, we have a whole lot of Marriotts we're going to build. And I thought, you know what, I'll just go back to Herod Framing here in Monterey, and we're just going to build our building. But it was something to think about, and what you pointed out is true. Certainly.
As a follow-up to that, if we wanted local labor, then we encourage a fabrication shop on, say, a piece of land near the airport or wherever.
That might be something.
And we have we build for the state or for the multi-states.
I mean, that's a conversation for another day, probably, but yes, recruiting business to Marina of any sort is a good idea out in the airport.
So if you have a problem,
it
then you
takes an
solve the problem.
enormous space to do a manufacturing apartment complexes. And that's the only thing I'm thinking about right now. But yeah,
we
for
have
ADUs,
enormous pieces of land.
There,
we don't.
okay,
Get us this.
I'll make it happen. There we
Go
go.
for it.
All right. Looks like you had some more questions, Commissioner St. John.
Ah.
Did you have some more
Do you
questions?
have more questions? No?
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Herr or
Jacobson.
Jacobson, thank you. I know him longer than anybody else. That's embarrassing.
It's all right. It's all right.
And so do either one of you have any questions at this time? Okay, so I'm going to open up the public hearing.
Sounds good.
And
I have my laptop, but I also have it. Let me see if I can open people up from
that would be great.
here. Yeah, no, he's only on the. Hold on, let me check.
There we go.
Gabriel, you can go ahead. Gabriel, you can go ahead and speak if you'd like.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I feel honored to be a panelist now. So my name is Gabriel Sanders. I'm the Housing and Community Development Director for the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. And we will be submitting more fulsome comments about the 6 cycle housing elements that Marina has published, but so far, so good. I just want to express specific support for this affordable housing overlay that is suggested for the 6th RENA cycle, because this is one of the policies that MBEP has identified as one of the best ways to not only streamline housing production, but also just reduce the risk and cost to developers for creating affordable housing. I know that the affordable housing overlay was originally conceived as a response to the 5th cycle and the needs for meeting those requirements, but keeping that in place and expanding that sort of dynamic anywhere possible in Marina by creating objective design guidelines that developers can follow, do all the work up front so that both their own staff and the staff in the city have as little work to do as possible, and so that housing can get built with as few obstacles as possible. That's the secret sauce. That's what I hear from all the developers that I speak with, especially those who are in the for-profit housing industry and would love to build affordable housing, either by design or by deed restriction. That is one of the most important ways to do it, and that's streamlining. And in fact, you will find housing streamlining as the #1 policy in our forthcoming housing white paper. So that's something to look forward to. If anybody is interested in learning more, we will be holding a housing summit next Tuesday, June 27th from 8:30 to 11 at CSUMB. You can find registration on our website. So we urge any of you to attend. And again, good work so far on this. I know in my previous position, I met with Guido and Ryan about the housing element, and I'm really pleased to see the progress they've made. I look forward to seeing Planning Commission, City Council embrace all these pro-housing policies. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriel. Guido, can
Sounds
you?
good. And the next one would be Natalie Magana. Natalie, can you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Magana. I am a project manager with Mid-Penn Housing. We're a local affordable housing developer in throughout Monterey and Santa Cruz County. And I just want to take a moment to thank the staff for all of your hard work on the housing element update.
Natalie, can I stop you for a moment? The sound, because you're talking fast, sounds kind of garbled. Can you speak just a little bit slower and louder? Maybe get closer to your mic. We're really having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I will do my best. I think my computer audio is a little wonky. Actually, if you give me a second, I can try to take it.
We have time.
Is this any better?
Perfect.
Much better, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, I just want to thank you all for your hard work on this housing element update, and I want to echo that the affordable housing overlay is a great implementation here. I do just want to make a couple of suggestions. It seems like the sites that are called out for the affordable housing overlay are small. Most of them are less than an acre, and in order to develop affordable housing, we try to max it. It's hard with a smaller amount of units on smaller properties. So it just it sounded like maybe there's something in the housing element about this, but streamlining lot mergers or parcel mergers to create potentially larger sites for affordable housing would really help these developments pencil. And then another suggestion that I had was within the MSD Marina Transit Exchange right on Reservation Road, there's lots of public transit options in the affordable housing overlay. So therefore, maybe parking requirements could be minimized even further to maximize the use of these small parcels for housing units and not parking. So those are just two thoughts I wanted to say. And, we look forward to continuing to work with you all on this and potentially partnering someday on developing housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
And next up is Jane from Eden Housing. So,
Good evening. My name is Jane Barr. I'm Associate Director of Real Estate Development at Eden Housing. First of all, we want to applaud your outreach on this. I think you've done a great job. I've looked at the draft. It seems solid. And we look forward to continuing to partner with you in reviewing this and bringing comments to the City Council. I would say that the larger sites are easier to develop. We find that affordable housing a project below the number of 60 units is very hard to do. And with your density, that would be difficult on an acre size lot. But we once again, we support the work on this, and Rita's done a great job and we appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane.
I believe that's all the speakers, Madam Chair.
Okay, would you like to
Oh,
speak?
I'm sorry. Yeah. You were already.
You've been
sorry.
answering questions for us, but-
Thank you.
But actually, yeah, I didn't come to talk about prevailing wage, just to talk about this document primarily. I also appreciated the section, what's it called? The objective design elements, design standards, combined with the housing overlay downtown. That and the affordable housing overlay in the specific plan downtown makes a big difference. It will help people develop housing. Jane Barr is correct. A larger site with more units makes it more economical for using the tax credit program, and costs of housing are so high, and prevailing wage kicks in often not just from the location on Fort Ord, but sometimes the source of funding that you use can cause it to be the case. So it's there, it adds cost. And it's unfortunate because people say, well, why? It's affordable housing. Why does it cost so much? It's housing. You know, garage doors cost a lot, but prevailing wage is not something that it fixes itself to the average small developer who's not trying to build affordable housing, where you have to keep your rents low. Therefore, you have to find a lot of sources of funding that keep your financing costs low. Anyway, thank you. When I did that, John Oaks up above the post office, I had to write my own specific plan because there was no downtown plan. Not a huge deal, but I am now AICP because I wrote a specific plan and you guys reviewed it, and it worked. But it was, an average developer doesn't want to write their specific plan for their 1 acre site. No, thank you. They would like to have that there so they can come in and do what they do, which is develop. So you're by writing this plan, it's going to make it easier for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, since there's no other public here, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring this back to the commissioners. Now is the right time for comments, things that you've read that either you're confused about and you'd like to see that confusion addressed by staff. Anything else that you may feel is valuable to staff that may need to be updated in this. This is the time to bring that up. And I see all sorts of sticky notes in here. So I think staff should probably have their pens handy because there's
Okay,
a
sounds
lot
good.
up here.
Sounds good.
So right now we have first Commissioner Walton.
Thank you. So, am I giving a comment or
This is, the
comments
comments
and
are
clarification?
and clarifications, that's right. So it's not questions anymore. It's, I saw this and I would like staff to address this particular issue, whatever that issue is that you're concerned about. Maybe you'd like to see it changed. Maybe you'd like staff to tweak it a little bit. There may be some language in there that seems confusing, whatever your particular issue is, but I
Okay,
hope I've given you enough.
Thank you, thank you,
Okay.
thank you, Madam Chair. So then I have just, I think, one, and that's with on 1-69. I don't know if I can find it fast enough, but with respect to the subprime lending, that the language here seems to blame the borrower as opposed to, and I just didn't like the way that it came across. Is generally recognized now that the major cause of housing crisis was a significant relaxation of underwriting criteria on home mortgages, leading many households to purchase homes that they could not afford over the long term. And this language, and it goes on, and this language to me, it just seems a little accusatory. And it kind of, in my opinion, some of that was with respect to predatory lending practices and some other factors that I wouldn't mind seeing this language, this particular language change to make it a little more, I think the word is amicable, but and I think that's it. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Okay. Commissioner Woodson.
I'll save some of my comments for the next time and I'll summarize them differently. But
No, he's
Now-
going to take a second bite of the apple.
I was gonna
I am
say,
gonna take a second
yes,
bite
the
later on.
Marina favorite public hearing phrase,
I am.
bites at the apple. Got
bites
it.
at the
Got
apple
it. So,
future.
so
But if we're gonna, and only because I was just thinking about this, on 167, and this is just me, literally the last sentence, service members were exposed to asbestos fibers in buildings where they ate, sleep, and work. While the use of asbestos in new construction ended, it remained present.
I'm sorry, I'm on 160.
So
What?
168, 167 to 168.
Okay. Light
So my-
remediation also.
My
Yeah.
comment on asbestos is that service members were exposed to asbestos fibers in buildings where they ate, slept, and worked. I understand it. I get asbestos. I did asbestos abatement, and almost all that that they were exposed to and everything else was non-fireable. And it wasn't really, yes, it's a concern. It was a concern during demolition and construction. It was not a concern on a day-to-day basis. And it's not the purpose of the document here to kind of take an environmental stance. And I think that this is kind of taking an environmental stance. So I would like to have you consider relooking at that from just a non-fireable and fireable was a really big deal on asbestos abatement.
We could certainly take a look at that.
There are some other editing comments, but I'll leave them there. That's just because I did it. It's a comment / question that came up, and it goes back to, again, developmental wise and clarification. As we are developing the downtown revitalization plan, and it's cited specifically in here, we talked about zoning and how we will set residential zoning at 30 along Del Monte at 50 units per acre. I think that's how it's phrased. And I can't remember the exact place. I'd have to find it because it was not a question. It only came up because of our conversations just now. However, as we were just talking about, density matters for finding developers. The comment was made that, well, 60 is a baseline versus 50. And as we go through this, again, if we go back to kind of my underlying premise of how do we maximize trying to get developers in here and maximize being able to use this, what is the right number? Is if the answer is 60 and a building 60 units of low-income housing is really what is the break-even point for developers right now, a lot of times, and we've set it at 50, it's close, but it's not going to drive developers to come out and support development areas. And the Del Monte corridor, plus or minus where we want to put that there, I think it's something to look into and research of what is, given as the world turns and as construction costs change and as everything else changes, that number probably changes also. And it has probably gone up as the cost of building has gone up. But what is the right number right now? And since we are kind of finalizing the downtown revitalization plan, and we're linking it to this, and we're trying to take advantage of the excess capacity we have, it all ties back to what is the best way to bring a developer in to build.
So there's a couple of factors involved. So for the affordable housing overlay, I'll use that as an example. So we had to prove to the state that we could meet our 5th cycle house and element. You have to prove that to the state by their kind of a show me the money kind of place. So you have to say, you can't say, oh, well, we're going to do everything at 120 units per acre if you've never built that in your city. So when we did the overlay, we have to show the state that we've done density at a certain range in order to show that it's a realistic density. Because if I say to the state, oh yeah, we're going to do 150 units an acre, but we've never done that before, and I can't show specific projects at specific densities per acre, the immediate comment back from the state's going to be, great, Guido, but you haven't done that in your city. So the power to get to what you're asking lies in this body's hands and the city council. The higher you approve the density of projects moving forward, then you help me show whoever's sitting in my chair 8 years from now that we have built projects at higher densities that could potentially bring more people in. But if we only do the bare bones minimum, because that's what the neighborhood screams about, they don't want more of housing, then 8 years from now, you're going to be in the same argument of, hey, how come we can't maximize our infill properties to show capacity to the state? So that answer, hopefully it answered the question.
It explains it, but I think mine is more, it's a takeaway. Again, I think it's more of an ask to go back to and relook at of, and that's why I say it was comment period, but it came up during this discussion. My point is, if we look at the state and we're providing a number and the number says that a density for us that is reasonable now is 50 units per acre. And because that's realistic and that's what the state will understand and accept, that also doesn't change the fact that if 60 per unit is the correct baseline for developers right now to actually come in and build, we can commit to 80. And whether it's in this document or whether it's to table us and go back to the revitalization plan as the baseline document for the Del Monte corridor. And we look at that and we say, okay, the baseline is 50. We are looking at 50 and that's what we're going to put forward to the state. However, in the document, our stated goal is to attempt to move up to 60 because that is a more reasonable standard for development.
Absolutely. Yeah. And,
then I
and
think
so,
that we highlight that because if we set a 50 and 50 is not reasonable to get a developer to come in right now, then we're not going to.
So later on in the,
Right.
my first big obstacle for this year is I want to get the overlay adopted and then housing element. Hopefully we can get this out the door and immediately pivoting to the downtown plan. So to answer your question, when the downtown plan comes before this body and to the council, I've added to the document minimum density and maximum. I added that because that helped me in East Palo Alto. I noticed that people would buy a property and they'd want to put in 10 units. And I would say, no, actually, our minimum there was 40 units an acre. You have to do 40. That's the minimum because that helped me meet. So anyway, so I've added that to the downtown plan, a minimum. If this body and the council agrees, you can certainly increase the minimum and the maximums within the downtown plan to do what you're saying, which is to attract people. And that's certainly within this body's right. And hopefully the council buys off on it. But yeah, whatever we can do to increase the minimum and maximum densities in the downtown plan, that helps residents, that helps build more housing, so.
Okay. And that answers the question. And it's more, I just hadn't read it recently, so I hadn't seen that. Thanks.
Anything else?
No, that's it for now.
Okay, we're going to move on to Commissioner St. John, and then it'll be Commissioner Jacobson. And Commissioner Her, if you do have any comments you'd like to make, we need to turn on your light in front of you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Commissioner St. John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I want to first start off by echoing my kudos to Guido and staff and Rincon for this treaties, and also echo Commissioner Walton and Vice Chair Woodson. This is very well written, very, very well written document. And it's a treatise. I don't read it as a novel. I've read thousands of novels.
Thank you. Thank you.
But this was, I started off putting notes that, we need some examples, and then by golly, I flipped the page and there was the examples. And so I scratched off that note. But anyway, I do have a few comments. I'm not an editor, but I've read enough to where I can edit. So let me just go through my editorial, and then I'll have a few buried questions in there also. But on, let's see, just like page 4.
1-4 or
Well, it's page 4, early on.
just 4? Okay.
Just 4, I think it's in the.
Yeah, and it's under Marina's history,
Right.
the paragraph, and about near about 2/3 of the way down the page, it says the construction of Highway 1 changed the character of the city. The Fort Ord Military Reservation was downsized and fully decommissioned. There seems to be something missing between the character of the city and capital V Fort Ord. At least a period should be there, but it doesn't flow at all. Just, I couldn't figure out why.
So I see the missing period, Commissioner St. John, but I'm not clear about the second part of your comment. So you're,
Okay,
so it's the
well,
construction of Highway 1 changed the character of the city. There should be a period there. And then, okay.
okay, all right, then.
Okay, we will correct that. Thank you.
Okay. Flip on. Okay, then under 1-38.
Okay, let me go back there. On the 38. I'm putting it up on the screen for if people are watching or just for the commissioner. 1-38. Yes. Zoning ordinance, general plan stuff. Yes.
Yeah, down near the bottom, development requirements, there we go. The next to last sentence, it says residential densities in Marina range from 1 unit per 5.5 acres. Yup. I think that should have been 5.5 units per 1 acre or per acre. Is that right?
Okay. 138. I'd have to look in the zoning code.
Okay. Yeah, but check that. I would propose that it's 5.5 units per acre instead of 1 unit per 5.5 acres.
Sounds good.
Okay. Then we go to 1-66. And this one is not editorial. This is just a question. See, is there, just in general, talking about water, is there any identified potential constraint in potable water to achieve the housing elements through 2031?
Yeah, so that actually, I spent quite a bit of time on that. We did reach out to outside coastal council attorney. So that language about CMEX is valid in terms of, in terms of the water extraction and its impact to the city's water. So that paragraph is a true statement. So.
On that, we talk about it, I mean, it's written there as the proposed Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project. That was more colloquially, I think, known or addressed as the desalinization project.
Believe
Desal
so.
project.
Yes, yes.
But that word is left out, and I don't know how many, it really doesn't give it much. The whole contentious issue was the desal project at the CMEX plant site.
Right.
And this kind of sugarcoats it down to the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project, which could very well be another well or two. So wouldn't it be to our advantage, to the city's advantage, to say that the desalinization project is very contentious?
Yeah,
And-
I think that because that came from the coastal attorney, I think that's actually the name of the desal project. That's the official name. Yeah.
Yeah, I can appreciate the formal name. I'm not so sure that the state will appreciate it as much, or if any of the people of Marina will appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you could check with council and see if we could squeeze in, some reference to desalinization.
Sure.
All right, on page 1-69, table 1-49.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an engineer and I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to come up with the totals under zoning and permitted density and achieved density units per acre. The last column was 41 and 48 and 30s and 40s. And we came up with 762. I'm missing a lot of lines. And then the middle column is 15 to 35, or a range of density units per acre. And you came up with 1,181. Very strong integer numbers, but I can't recreate them.
Yeah, I think what they were trying to show is that, there's a certain, so if in table 1-49, it shows kind of the density range.
Uh-huh.
And then it actually shows that this commission and the council have been very progressive in actually allowing density bonuses. And there've actually been a couple instances there where the density has been exceeded by approval of density bonus. But yeah, we can certainly clarify how those numbers came about. So.
Is it even important to have the totals on the bottom?
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe that's a better way to, okay. That works.
Yeah, I'm fine without the totals.
That makes sense.
Because it's just an example table.
Right. So.
Okay. Now, on 1-71, we're talking about, well, let's see, let me go back to 1-70. Yeah, this is energy conservation. And nowhere did we talk about or mention solar or solar panels. And in homes that were started prior to January 1st, 2020, I think there was a state law that took effect for all housing starts from January 1st, 2020 onward, were mandated to have a solar panels, solar energy. Is that correct?
Right, but I think that's more for newer development. This is more, what are we doing to help current people stay in their homes? How are we helping people be energy efficient? Because many people are on fixed incomes. So let me give background, because so a part of the housing element, part of the policies you'll see is, you know, we've talked about site inventory, which is, hey, what are you doing to show capacity to meet your number, right? That's one part of what we're talking about. Another part of it is, what are we doing to help people who are in their homes right now?
Oh, okay.
So this commission adopted the reasonable accommodations ordinance, which helps people if they need to get a ramp or get a zoning clearance to stay in their home. And then the other part of in every housing element is, what are we doing to help make homes energy efficient? Because that actually was written into housing element law by the state legislature. So that's kind of the background for this. I mean, we can certainly reference after January 1st, you had to have a solar panel, but this is more in that lines of what are we doing to keep people in their homes being energy efficient and stuff like that.
Okay,
So,
I stand, I understand
okay, no problem.
the purpose of that
No problem.
page. Okay. On page 2-4.
Okay, one second. I gotta pivot to. Two dash four.
Yeah, first paragraph.
2-4. Okay,
Yeah, up at the top. This is the Dune specific plan.
right.
And the last sentence on the top paragraph, the remaining 572 above moderate units are under building permit review, and permits are estimated to be complete within the 6th cycle, which within the 6th cycle is 2031.
Right.
But this would be just the issuing of the permits, would be the review, and I guess when the permit is issued, that's all we can do. It
So
just seems like,
let me just read it for myself. So the remaining are under bid and RB estimated complete. Yeah, so chapter 2 is more leading into the programs. This is just showing what is kind of in the pipeline as of now. So there's a couple things in housing element when we're doing them. There's the issuance of the permit. There's where's the housing element cycle end, and when is the permit finalized, right? So there's a couple different benchmarks. I think this chapter is just more, this is the capacity for the dunes at this point.
I just
So,
wouldn't want anyone reading it to get the idea that it's going to take the permitting department till the end of 2031 to finish reviewing the 572 permits. So, just-
yeah, I'd have to look at the dunes construction schedule. I mean, they're making a lot of progress, but there are still quite a few homes out there that have to be built. So probably will be done by the end of this cycle. I'm almost certain.
Okay.
So,
Then moving along, under the Sea Haven master plan, all of the plans for the dunes, the Marina station, but under Sea Haven, you didn't mention how many acres were involved in Sea Haven. If you can dig that out and add it in there, then it would more or less be consistent with the format of the other major developments.
okay.
All right, now we get into another table on page 2-7, table 2-4.
2-4. Okay.
And I was able to figure out what the totals were, but it took me, a few iterative steps to even conclude that yes, the lower income does total up to 178 and moderate 174, et cetera. But what confused it is under the affordable housing overlay, you have the total, the under affordable housing overlay, that line is a 35, 72, 425, 532. And then underneath the next two lines are sub lines of the 35 is 18 plus 17. And so it's the total units on vacant site and the total units on underutilized sites. Those are subsets of the affordable housing overlay. Now, if you just leave out the numbers of the affordable housing overlay, leave out the number 3572, and just reference the next two lines, then the math adds up.
I'm not tracking on what you're saying, but I can certainly go back and if Ryan wants to comment on this
Or
section.
leave the subtotal. Yeah, okay.
Hi, commissioners. I was just gonna say, I understand what he's saying, and we can update the table so it's a little easier to read.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, 2-11.
Already?
This is getting into water, one of our favorite topics. The units for water is 1 million gallons a day, MGD. In the first, in most of the paragraphs. But however, you got into towards the end of paragraph 2, you talk about the
acre feet.
Yeah, acre feet, 1,427 acre feet. If you convert that to MGD, then it blends in to make your point.
Yeah, I mean, acre feet is a common numerical designation for water, but we can certainly, make it flow better. That's fine.
But, it's hard to come up with how much your shortage is or how you solve the shortage problem if they're not in the same units.
Understood.
Okay, now under 3-2.
3-2?
Yeah, this chapter 3, your housing action plan, like you say, that is the meat and potatoes.
Right.
Right. And these housing policies are very good. Just one comment on number 7, housing policy number 7.
Number 7. Is it
Development of adequate housing for special needs groups, including
what page? I'm sorry, Commissioner, what, just so I can.
3-2.
3-2. Housing policies are carried forward and modified from the 2025-20,000 element. Provide opportunities for and encourage development of adequate for the city's special needs, elderly, disabled, large family. Yeah, that's pretty standard out of housing element law. So
is it appropriate or inappropriate where you have the very last group or category, those in need of emergency shelter? Is it inappropriate to put e.g. homeless?
I'd have to punt to Ryan on that one in terms of, because I'm almost verbatim. That's straight out of housing element code. But yeah,
I think that's what
I believe emergency shelter is defined earlier, and those are not equivalent.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember where it's defined. I just remember because I was curious about the emergency sheltering because I literally was just talking with somebody in Salinas today about emergency shelters.
They should be defined in chapter 1.
Got it.
Okay.
We can go back and look at that.
Now on 3-10,
3-10.
program 5.1.
Program 5.1. Property inspection, ongoing implementation, inspect 200 properties annually and refer income eligible households to available resources for rehabilitation. Yeah, that's part of what we were talking about is, what can we do to keep people in their current housing?
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's usually pretty standard in most housing elements. So.
And then the program 5.1 was the inspection and code enforcement. And this is the only place in the book in all 300 or 400 pages where there's a contingency. And this is contingent upon availability of adequate staff. What would happen if you left that contingency off? Just didn't write that. And then fast forward to 2025 or 2026, and you're truly short of staff and you can't do a inspection and something slips through and the piece of property is sold and it's got a bogus shack on it. What's the downfall of not having that contingency clause in this plan?
I mean, these are the policies we're gonna have to implement, so it probably is prudent to keep that sentence because, there might be another global pandemic or the city's finances go off a cliff or, so it's probably wise just to say there are certain goals that we do really have to meet. Some of this stuff is, because these policies are written for, I live in San Jose, there's 1 million people, there's hundreds of staff, but these policies are also written for Kingsburg and Kalinga and Dinuba and very small cities, right? So, this is generally acceptable language to the state because they know they're dealing with the Oaklands of the world and also the, Dinubas of the world, right? And Florida, even right? So it's probably would be wise to keep that in there.
But if you
So-
didn't have it in there, what is the possible outcome? A penalty or in CNN certainly not going to come and do a story on it.
I mean, as long as we're making progress towards meeting these programs and policies and we're showing we're being a fair player for housing, I don't think taking it out, is that bad. But like I said, it's probably good because we are a pretty small staff. It's just me, Allison, and Nick doing all the planning. So it's,
So can I make
so,
a
yeah,
comment that
yeah.
might help? What I believe that what you are responding appropriately to is that they expect you to meet this unless you show for some reason you can't meet it.
Right.
And by putting this in here, you're saying that there is a possibility we wouldn't be able to meet that.
Right.
And because we've announced that up front, it is not, and it's no longer a serious issue. You don't have enough staff, and we have certainly been there before. And I think it was 2008, we had a community development director and an admin in the entire planning department.
Right.
So we didn't have staff. When I was on city council, code enforcement was dropped to 1 day a week,
Right, which it is now.
which it's still today. Okay, so, and
But we are hiring for a position, so if any of you are looking, so let me know.
yeah, so, but it's important for the public as well as for HCD and for our own staff to recognize that these things happen and we are covering ourselves by having that in.
And
Does
before you-
that help?
Yeah, it's just the only place in the
Well-
book where there is a contingency that is predicated on a shortage of staff.
And,
It-
and that's because this is a requirement and this is where,
Yeah, and Chair Amadeus, right. We actually only have code right now, as of now, for 1 day a week. So
And the only reason why the city council kept it on as 1 day a week is it's a requirement by FCC that there be a code enforcement officer for the airport.
right.
So, and code enforcement happens to deal with the rest of the city as well.
Right.
But it was a requirement for the airport. We couldn't drop it all together, no matter what our budget was.
Before you move on to the other subject, I want to step back 2 comments. So the issue on homeless population versus shelter, I knew what it was, but I just had to find it. So around page 1-28 through 1-36, homeless is considered a special population. Shelters is a housing type. So shelters are like ADUs so the housing types are like around 140 through 145. So there it literally is 2 different one's a type of population group and one's a type of housing.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, anyway, I will withdraw my,
Sounds good.
keep the contingency in there.
All right, sounds good.
Okay,
But just to, we're going to be starting that recruitment, and code enforcement is a priority of the city council. And it does tie into the housing element. Like I said, that if somebody owns a property and they're not being a good landlord and properties are not properly maintained, it becomes an attractive nuisance, then housing doesn't become viable for residents. And so we want people to feel comfortable and safe in their neighborhoods. So code enforcement does play a vital role for housing in the city. So, and this specific comment, Marina has in their municipal code something rather unique. Every time somebody transfers property, we have to do a residential property inspection report. So somebody from the building department will actually go out. We will share the records we have of the property, and they will do an exterior walk of the property, and that will be noted and given to the seller and the buyer. And it's actually a good way for city staff to become aware of any major housing issues for properties. So, yeah. So.
all right. Let's go 3-13. The housing.
Affirming fair housing.
Yeah, these are affordable, furthering fair housing. Under housing mobility program 2-1. This one we've talked about quite a bit, or several discussions of it this evening about the pre-approved ADU.
We're working on that.
Will that lower the permitting fees?
Absolutely.
Right, and so is it fair to add that kind of statement in here?
Sure, we can make a statement. That's fine.
Yeah.
So 2.1, page 3-13, note pre-approved plans will reduce cost.
Okay, and the next page 3-14.
3-14, okay.
Under affordable housing, let's see. I just had my own note down here to expand mobile home zoning to include tiny houses.
Okay, which policy?
Where did we talk about oh, yeah, improving preservation and improvement of mobile home parks.
4.1, annually pursue funding opportunities at the local, state, and federal. Pursue permanent PLHA money for new construction rehab, as well as provision for mobile home parks. Funding becomes available, prioritize funding in the projects for downtown area. Yeah, so that language is in there.
Yeah. But currently, I guess it's in vogue that tiny houses are sort of a
Let me mute people.
Anyway, tiny houses are kind of become a new coined word or terminology for mobile homes in a way. Yeah, you roll them in and, or, you know.
They
or
they
get a-
really are a different housing.
It's a
type.
different housing type, but it's about the same size as mobile homes.
No, some of them are 250
Yeah.
to 300.
Yeah, they're just
50 square
small,
feet.
The biggest is your
one-person
closet.
kind of units, and they don't have the facilities that a mobile home would have. I mean, the mobile homes can be 2,500 feet these days.
But to his point, and but I think the getting past the sizing issue, the point of there are grants and programs that are out there that support the tiny home program nationally, and adding in improvement of mobile. My only question here on the affordable home it's annual. And I'm sorry to jump in on yours. Annually pursue funding opportunities available at local, state, and federal levels as appropriate. Yeah, I think it's that second sentence, specifically pursue permanent. Yeah, I think instead of saying specifically, it would be examples of programs to look at or review include PLHA, rehabilitation, acquisition, preservation, and improvement of mobile home parks. And then that way to allow us to add tiny homes, because I don't think there's actually a set program, but it opens up the capability, it opens up that category.
And the tiny house is a
In the
unit.
policy without necessarily saying that we're going to do it. I think the concern that I have with that specifically is that it said specifically, and that becomes very restrictive.
I understand what Commissioner St. John is saying. He just wants us to recognize small, tiny homes, and we can certainly add a sentence or, yeah, that's fine. We can tweak it. I understand what the commission is trying to get at. So.
I'm getting to the end and kind of nitpicking here, but on 3-17.
Yep.
Under program 5-2.
5-2, okay.
The sentence annually monitor the affordable units by maintaining contact. And add the word with property owners.
With property owners. Okay. Okay. And for the rest of the commission, and even Commissioner St. John, I am taking notes. But if there is a way for your comments to be emailed to me, just so I just want to make sure I'm accurately capturing. So the comment period ends July 8th. So if you're able to get me your comments early, that helps me catalog everything. And but yeah, if you're able to put these on paper, just in case I missed something. So
Anyway, I've reached the end, and all of my own notes on following and checking back. So that's it. That's my
thank you.
my comments.
We appreciate your comments.
Okay, so then we are going to miss Sean. We're going to move on to Commissioner Jacobson. I put all of that in a single word.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that has become apparent to me as we were talking tonight, and also reviewing the document and talking about the cost of building and the 30% increase because of the labor, is several weeks ago, we had a pretty good long discussion about alternative methods of building. And we kind of know from traditional builders what's out there. But I can actually remember somebody showing us slides of people building homes that are 3D printed.
Oh, that was Councilmember McCarthy. Yeah.
McCarthy, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's another community in Phoenix, I believe, that's building innovative way. And I'm wondering if that shouldn't be one of our housing policies in the document.
Absolutely. If that's something the commission wants to add as a program, to have staff look at What would be the title of the
I
program?
kind of just drafted something that, explore technology-driven construction methods in an
Excellent.
effort to improve quality, reduce costs, and decrease time to occupancy.
That's great. And if you're able to put that on paper and email it, because I think that's a fabulous idea. And just by way of context, before I came here, I worked on a 90-unit affordable housing project, actually with Eden Housing in Los Altos, and it was all a prefab constructed. And so pretty sure it should be done by now. But because it's made in a shop and it's basically like big Legos for a whole project, it's very easy to put, it's obviously takes work, but it's not as labor intensive and costly as doing stick built. And as a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up, Commissioner Jacobson, because when we had our joint meeting with the council and this body, one of the goals for Cypress Knolls was to direct Allison and I, when we come back with the RFP, to look at ways to make it available for missing middle incomes. And the way we can do that is if we look at these alternative housing methods and how to make Cypress Knolls energy efficient. So that's actually a really good point. So if you're able to put something on paper and send it to me, we can definitely add it to the document.
Be happy to.
If this would be appropriate to put in that section that Commissioner Jacobson is going to do, would be tiny alternative construction types of homes by size, by materials, i.e. the tiny homes,
Right,
the container homes.
right.
Those are all different kinds of construction that, you get a container and you're basically working on the inside to turn a container for shipping into a livable unit.
Right.
So, so those would also.
Yeah,
be-
those
I
are
think
very
fit
great
with-
comments.
With what Commissioner Jacobson was.
Excellent comments.
That's all, Madam Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Hurd, do you have anything?
Well, nothing specific, but I personally want to thank Ryan and also the staff for producing this report, because just by reading it, I mean, it was very educational and I learned a lot just by reading this report.
We have a second bite at the apple and then I have a couple of things.
Yeah, and in fact, there were some comments that I heard from residents of Marina, and which is different from the housing elements, but related to general plan. So I would like to share that toward the end of the meeting.
Great.
Right.
So,
Coming back, I have, and these are more clarification questions of just understanding Rena and how we do things. The first question was, as part of the background, the baseline that is described that is on income, for example, we use the county's numbers instead of the city's annual numbers. And our baseline average income in the city is 5% lower than the baseline income in the county. And so when Rita does its calculations, I'm assuming further on, thank you, Dana, very much.
good night, Dana.
When those income numbers, I'm assuming, are plugged into the sausage machine and come out and plug with things, that becomes an input source. So I'm just curious, why is it because the county is kind of basically MBAG and that's why we end up using those numbers instead of our own city numbers for
So area median income usually is done by county. For a family of 4 in Monterey County, I don't have the stat right off the top of my head. I thought it's like
it's in
94,000, 90,000 or so. So it's a lot higher in San Jose where I live. But yeah, those are usually done by county, not by city, unless you're San Francisco, because they're a city and a county. But yeah, so that's usually how it's done. And then HCD publishes a memo that shows all the counties and if you have 1 person in your household or 4 or 5, and what's the area median income per county by family. So that's usually how it's done.
So the follow-on that goes with that makes sense. They have to have some baseline. Cities are whole different sizes up and down.
Yeah.
And so 500 people in a city or 50 people in a city or 20 people in a city, Kybers, versus something very big. So I kind of get that. At the kind of follow-on to that, though, is as you start looking at these numbers, and this is just theoretical, I don't understand. how does that all get normal? I will get with you offline about this. 'Cause
No,
this
go
is
ahead and
more-
ask
it's
your
more-
question. It's
just a
probably
kind of a technical one of how does you take all the information from chapter 1, and it gets standardized back towards the city. So when we get our RENA numbers that come out of the sausage machine, they're based on a lot of county averages and a lot of things because that's how the Census Bureau rolls it up. But then when we get to here, and the example that really came out to me was the population growth chart was linear. And it's showing that we have a population expectation growth of about 8,000 people over the period of cycle 6, which is about 1,100 per year. And that was about a 20% growth rate for the city of Marina.
Mhm.
And it was linear. And I don't quite understand the linear nature of it because when I plan this and I think about where our growth is right now, our growth is in Sea Haven, our growth is in the dunes for the next couple of years. Eventually it will move into Marina Station. We should see a cap at some point. I just don't think it's linear.
Yeah, so to answer your question, the AMBAG and the creation of the RENA number, it goes into a black box. There's like several different variables they use. This last cycle, there was a focus from the state and from the local COGS to put housing in high resource areas like Monterey, Pacific Grove, Carmel, where I live, Los Altos, Los Gatos. That was done purposely because of affirming fair housing. We're a moderately income community here. And so that was part of the reason why our number was not as high as, say, Monterey and Carmel and PG. But there's a whole host of factors that, quite frankly, very few people I think understand. We should just be blessed our number is only 685. That's basically the gist of it, because it's a pretty in-depth conversation about how the number, after it leaves the black box, comes to our city, and cities fight over the number and they try to appeal it and this, that, but we should just be fortunate we have a low number and we're able to beat it without having to rezone a whole bunch of properties, which a lot of cities are having to do. So.
Oh, absolutely. And we talked about one of those local communities before the meeting.
Right.
That is very contentious.
Right.
And
so
we're just not gonna have to
we're
deal
fortunate
we're
here.
fortunate we don't have to deal with Carmel. The last one I have is on page 170. It talks about, and this is the loan acceptance rates for homes. And it's a small number, but it directly it would have, in these statistics, it would have actually directly impacted myself when I first bought here a number of years ago. And let me kind of go to the page and explain the issue. So on government-backed homes, this is table 150. It talks about, okay, these are the total applications. These were the loan origination. These were approved but not accepted. Applications denied and then withdrawn or incomplete. And I'm really more concerned with the applications denied. And again, this isn't necessarily a RENA issue. It's more just how can we address things like that? Because my kind of comment is, number one, government-backed loans that were denied. I'm not sure if that number is a lot. It makes sense because I think they're probably more. Right? So it goes back to appraisals, and VA appraisals along the Monterey Peninsula it's a well-known fact. If you're a veteran, the appraisal process here has challenges with getting approved for a VA loan, and many times they're being denied. And that is exactly what happened to me. I was denied because my property was larger than the standard property for Marina. And as a result, they said, well, there's no way to do comps on this. So therefore, we're just not going to value your property, and your house is going to be worth this, which was at that point almost $300,000 lower than what the going rate was for the area. And so it was outright denied. And luckily, the seller was a veteran also. They wanted us into it, and we just worked and we converted it over to an FHA, and it went through very easily. As we move forward with that and we look at these, I'm not the exception. And I have talked to a lot of veterans over the years, and that is something that happens a lot across the peninsula, but it happens in our community because we have some of the more affordable housing in the region, especially for veterans. And as we move forward and we start looking at these capabilities and look at the main areas of Marina, the more average and moderate income houses that veterans specifically can get into, how can we look at addressing that inequity issue and engage? Because the answer that the VA would give is that they randomly apply an assessment person. The assessment person, though, is subjective in what they do. And what we have, most of us have found as veterans, is that we push back and we try to get somebody from Santa Cruz or Los Gatos. That's where the other two local assessors are. We try to get them to come down here, and they seem to have a much more objective approach to looking at things.
Right.
And again, it doesn't affect the normal plan here, but if we look at policies and how do we impact policies and how do we look at bringing people into our community, how do we create a policy that, or is there a way to do that? And there may not, and the answer may be there just isn't.
So veterans are, so, there's a whole series, and can you guys see my screen? Program 4.1. So, it doesn't have the full list, but, people who are low income, elderly, disabled, people with developmental disabilities, and, veterans are also usually in that net of people with special housing needs. We can certainly work with the commission, or we can work offline to add some language to find ways to support veterans in housing, because they are a special housing needs group.
And I'd say veterans because I'm a veteran and it was something that directly affected me. But to your point, maybe it's the expansion of the protected groups, because veterans are all the other ones you named, the handicap or disabilities. These are all the protected groups that are recognized. And how can we reach out and support these protected groups?
Right, absolutely. We can certainly try to craft some language or try to insert it in one of these programs. So
thank you.
They are an important member of the community. So
that's it.
Okay, I just have a couple of comments after all the comments today. I can't believe there's anything left for me to say. But I was concerned that, and I found one of them. I had everything marked, but as I'm moving through things, I take my markers out and I don't know where they are.
Okay.
But Marina Heights Residential Table 1-37. It's giving general plan residential land designation, which I understand.
Let me get there. 1 second.
It's table 1-37.
Oh, table.
Page number is 138. 1-38.
Okay, great. Table 1-37. Great. Okay.
So, so Marina Heights is in the general plan. However, it's fully approved and being built and it's almost completed. So I didn't understand why that was still in there when the Dunes isn't in there. That's also a specific plan and it would have parameters just like Marina Heights. And Cypress Knolls is not in there, but it's in the general plan. A Marina Station isn't in there, but I believe that's also in the general plan. And Cypress Knolls and Marina Station are anticipated to at least be approved and hopefully start construction before this housing element would be completed. And so I felt like those things should be in there. Not so sure Marina Heights should be in there. Or
Okay.
if it is in there, it should also say in parentheses Sea Haven.
We can take a look at that.
Okay. And then the other thing, and I can't find it now, but it was also listed in one part of this first section, which was the K zoning, residential zoning, which is agriculture.
Yeah. I
And
think
in
Allison
one part of
pointed
this
that out to me.
document, it says we don't have any agriculture.
Yeah, that's
And
a
in the other
carryover.
part,
Yeah,
It
that's
says, oh, hey, this belongs in our zoning to have this K zoning and how many houses per acre. And I think it was 1 house per 5 acres. We don't have anything like that.
yeah,
So
that
those
was
things
a
need to be
carryover.
addressed. And
carryover.
all of it was as part of that chapter.
Yeah, those are just carryovers from the previous housing
And
element. So
figured that, but we haven't had agriculture for decades.
Sounds good. We will take care of that.
So,
That's why we're here.
okay, that was my only two
Great.
things that I thought should be fixed.
Sounds good.
Okay. So, do you have everything you need going forward from? us
Yeah, and I
other
just,
than-
out of courtesy, like Commissioner Jacobson had some great language. If he wants to email that to me, Commissioner St. John, I did try as best I could. And we do have the video, but if you guys are able to email me your comments as soon as possible, because let me just show you the schedule. So as you see, so the 30-day comment period ends, and then they added this, the state added this new, I have to, within 10 business days at the end of the public comment period, I have to respond to each of the comments. So I just want to make, before I ship it up to the state. And so I just want to make sure I capture all of your great edits. So if you're able to send those to me, and then we're really trying to make December, we're a little bit behind schedule. We might bleed a little bit into January of next year, but as you can see, it's a pretty, pretty truncated schedule. The state is offering as a courtesy at day 45 of their review to kind of do an informal check-in with us. I understood Ryan from Rincon's done that a couple times with other cities. So hopefully at day 45, I'll get a better sense of, hey, are we even in the ballpark of hopefully getting approved the second round or no? And so then at the end of that, we'll try as best we can to revise the document, include all of these comments, come back to the commission and council. We kick it up to the state, and then that starts another 60-day review. But I've worked on this enough that usually if you're pretty close, you can informally call the state and say, hey, we're about to send this to you guys again. What do you guys think? They'll usually say, well, no, you're still missing some stuff, or yeah, looks like you're on the right track. Informally, they'll say on the phone, you know, we can't give it officially, blah, blah, blah. But then they'll say, yeah, you're on the right track. And then hopefully at the end of that 60-day second round of review, we'll be able to get it certified.
So I do.
So that's, anyway, so that's the overall process that we've got some pretty significant statutory deadlines. We've basically got 150 days of the calendar is state review. And we're already at July, so.
I do have a question regarding the calendar since starting in October, there are a lot of days when City Hall is closed.
Mhm.
And you look at December into January, and it's close to 2 weeks, I believe. That City Hall is
It's like a
closed.
week in between Christmas and New Year's.
It's a week between Christmas and
Yeah.
New Year's. Okay. So that has an impact on that final deadline.
Right.
And it might be wise to talk to HCD early on and let them know that this truncated schedule is even more truncated simply by the fact that our offices are closed. And theirs isn't closed on everything, but ours is, because no.
I'm a manager, I'm exempt, I can work 20 hours a day and still get paid the same, so I will be here.
Yeah.
You will, this
Yeah, but do you
document will
really
not,
want to be working when
Now,
everybody
this-
else is on
yeah.
vacation?
this document will not be
Christmas
held up
and
because of me. I will work on this as much as I can.
Christmas
It's
Day.
Yeah.
Maybe not Christmas Day, but the day after, yes. So, but no, I do hear your point, Chair
Yeah,
Amadeo.
it
Yeah,
just-
yeah. So,
But we had already talked about this for December a couple months ago, that looking at our calendar, our meetings are the 14th and the 28th. The 28th is going to be canceled.
right.
And so we actually, from a planning commission perspective, we only have one meeting in December,
And I believe only one meeting.
and we
in
only have one
November.
meeting in November, which is the 9th, because the 23rd is Thanksgiving.
Right.
Right. Well, we might be having a couple of special meetings. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And luckily, the housing element is just adoption of a resolution that only requires one reading by the council. So hopefully we can get the commission and council. If I'm bugging you in November, December for special meetings, it's not because I want you to come to extra meetings. It's probably because of the housing element. So.
So the question also, can those two meetings be joint meetings with the council so that it's not a back and forth. We're hearing the same presentation. We take our vote with recommendation. They take their vote for approval.
I'll have to check with the city attorney on that because there was some court case from 2007 or
Because it's a public
8-ish
hearing.
about the council supposed to have whatever the commission's recommendation is. I'll have to double check that, but that's a great idea. We can certainly look into that. So. Yeah, so we're going to be hitting it close, basically. So we might have to have special meetings and so.
Good. So we'll see here. Oh, and thank you to Ryan. Oh, did he already? Oh, no, he's still there. Thank you, Ryan Russell, for all you did in putting this together. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you. And it was a team effort with Veronica, who wasn't able to make the meeting tonight. So maybe
Well, please tell her thank you.
Will do.
I believe Commissioner Herr wanted to general plan.
Okay, so moving away from the housing element, I just wanted to share that. From people, in fact, one is I have three comments, and the first one is a question. And in fact, I was at a fundraising event, and this person approached me and asked me this question: how many ADUs are considered as affordable housing?
How many ADUs?
Yeah, and I did. I mean, is there regulation on that, or I was to answer?
So the answer is they're by design. Because we're just getting their input. So yeah. So I have actually, we did actually prepare a resolution for the commission for the housing element. So maybe if I could table your question for a little bit, Commissioner Herr. So the motion is to recommend that this item be pushed forward to council and that the council then hopefully push it up to the state for a 90-day review period. So that's
okay. So if we can have a motion as I'm going to say as stated by our community development director to move this forward.
I make a motion that we approve the.
I'll pull up the staff report.
Oh, thank you.
So one second. Agenda Center. Thank you. Appreciate it. Pull up the. Where is my? Here, let me pull it up. The official motion is right here.
A little bit more.
I have the motion here.
One second. Right there, right at the top. So staff recommends the following motion to approve the project, adopt the resolution recommending that the city council review the 6-cycle housing element, draft housing element, and forward it to state HCD to begin the 90-day review period.
What you said.
Sounds good.
I probably need to say it. So I recommend that we accept the motion to adopt a resolution recommending that the city council review the draft 6-cycle housing element and forward it to the state housing compliance department,
community
development to begin a 90-day review period.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. So we have a motion by Vice Chair Woodson and seconded by Commissioner St. John. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Chair Amadeo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodson,
Yes.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Commissioner Herr,
Yes.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion approves. All right, now to answer Commissioner Herr's question. So ADUs are supposed to be by design affordable. Some cities put a deed restriction to say if you accept some city money, then you will agree to keep it at a certain amount of rent. That helps that city meet their housing numbers. Right now, we're not doing that. We haven't done a survey of ADUs. That's something we can add to the housing element. Up in the Bay Area, a lot of cities got together and they did a real scientific type of analysis, and they sent out postcards and people filled it out. And there was a breakdown of about 30% of the units are being sold at a moderate income level, 30% at a low, and 30% at a very low income level. And so some cities use that as the basis for how they're gonna meet their RENA numbers in 8 or 9 years. So that answers your question, hopefully.
So you just said sold at. as opposed to
Rented,
sold or
rented.
Okay.
So that was one question. You had 3, you said.
Okay, and the second is a comment. And in fact, this resident mentioned that we are updating general plan now, but the previous general plan, the old general plan, had 47 amendments.
Right.
So she came up with this idea that, when we make amendments, it's usually the builders and the applicants, depending on their needs, and they ask us to accommodate.
Right.
So she came up with this idea that, if we have to make 47, what's the use of creating a general plan when there are so many amendments? So she said that, why don't we, kind of put certain amount, if you make changes, let's say, for example, this is 500 charge to make amendment or $1,000 to make,
Yeah. So I mean,
so
so
it
like,
was an idea that she was.
yeah. So if you look at our U.S. Constitution, there have been 27 certified amendments. There have been another 20 or 30 that were put on state ballots but not actually approved. The idea is that these documents should change and evolve with the times. And so by state law, you're supposed to update, you can do 4 general plan amendments a year. So there are some restrictions so that it doesn't always get changed like you're saying. But the general plan is really supposed to be the embodiment of the city's kind of culture and values. And so there is opportunity to amend it. So hopefully that ends, but I hear what you're saying. Well, what's the point of going through this whole process if you're then gonna immediately amend it? And I guess my answer back is, even in our US Constitution, the US Constitution was ratified, but it was only ratified because the founders said, we're only going to ratify it if we immediately do the 10 Bill of Rights. So it was an immediate amendment to the US Constitution. So even in our country's history, there's been that, well, we ratified it and then the next day we worked on the 10 Bill of Rights, right? So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think
so-
she also was alluding to the fact that, maybe we could be, because we are so accommodating to the builders, what the applicants request. So maybe, by putting some kind of, charge, that
Oh, we
could
do,
charge.
we do,
yeah.
we do. So for example, the Dunes developer who came to you, normally Brad was from RGS Consulting, so we're charging the Dunes for that work. Normally, if somebody wants to amend the general plan or zoning code, it's a $7,000 charge.
Oh.
So it's a pretty significant, so if somebody, yeah, so it's not an easy thing to do,
Oh, okay.
right?
okay.
So there is that charge.
And then maybe it's not known
Yeah.
to the public. That's why she came
Yeah.
up with that comment. And another thing is, I heard this from a neighbor who used to live in Sunnyvale. And what she was saying was that, obviously she moved to Marina, recently, and what she was saying is that, I don't know how long ago, but it seems that she lived in Sunnyvale for such a long time, that Sunnyvale started out like Marina, the size of Marina, but
Mhm.
they came up with, this plan, like 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan. So they
Mhm.
had this plans that the city implemented. So when we compare Sunnyvale with Marina now, there's difference. So she was saying that, I mean, we don't have to copy what Sunnyvale did, but some of the things that the city, kind of developed their ideas in terms of in terms of, how they will, accommodate land use and these
Right.
things. We can use that as a reference point since we are updating our general plan.
Yeah.
These things.
Yeah. So Hanson Hom, who you guys met at the joint meeting of the Planning Commission and City Council, he actually was the former director in Sunnyvale.
Oh.
And they've actually won national awards for how well run of a city they are. And so they actually every 3 or 5 years, they revise a lot of their policies, programs. They touch different parts of their general plan every 2 or 3 years to make it current. And so, yeah, it's a very well-run city. Yeah, we can definitely learn a lot. We can definitely, somebody has a different opinion, but okay. Anyways, but Sunnyvale is a very well-run city from a city municipal government perspective. We can definitely learn from them.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, since
so.
it's,
Maybe
started
Jane
on the
has a
similar
different
side.
opinion from Eden Housing, but
So if there are, wait a minute, we don't have a study session informational items, none, staff updates. Okay.
Hi, thanks, everybody. Just really briefly, I did want to let the commission and the public know that following up on that pre-approved ADU plans, we did send out an RFP. We had a pre-bid call this past Monday. So Alec Barton is the project manager for that. We had a pre-bid call. We had 4 architects and designers call in to ask some questions. So we're hoping to get a few submittals on that. The submittals are due at 5 o'clock on June 30th. And we do, once we get this moving a little bit further, we are going to definitely publicize to the public. So this opportunity is well known to people because it will majorly decrease costs to property owners for building ADUs.
So question for you, when those submittals come in, is it approved administratively, those designs?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Commissioner Walton.
I'm wondering if, so I saw there was availability for ADUs on Amazon and I think Costco. Are those included with the 10 or are you looking for specific individual
Yeah.
developers that?
These are going to be
manufacturers?
specifically designed for Marina.
Okay,
And they'll go through our plan check process through the building department. However, somebody, if they can meet the setbacks and lot coverage and all that stuff, anybody can go to Costco or any of these other these are prefab. There are quite a few now, prefab
And those are allowed.
manufacturers.
And
And
those are allowed.
they have to go through the standard building permit
Okay.
process for that.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so we have no correspondence, major projects update.
The dunes, we're making a lot of progress on the promenade. The brass tap project has gone vertical in terms of the floor of the walls. So the promenade, yeah, that will be, you're going to see quite a bit of progress in the next year on that. Alice and I are working very hard with the Marina Station applicant on an affordable housing agreement, and they should, fingers crossed, be moving dirt in the next 6 to 9 months. And Sea Haven is going to be coming to the commission next meeting to give an update. I might have to cancel next meeting because besides that, I don't have another item. But if they do, the Sea Haven folks will be coming to give an update. And the downtown, my priority right now is housing element and then immediately pivoting to hopefully getting the downtown plan out on the street soon. So,
I don't remember where I saw it. Might have been an article in the Herald, that it is hoped that the downtown vitalization will specific plan will be approved before the end of the year.
that might be a little bit ambitious. The focus is housing element, that there's a statutory deadline there, but definitely trying to get it back on track.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I have one question. Yeah. And you can just say, no, we're deferring on this one until later. So there is a proposal sitting out there. And I think I know a couple of the council members, I know myself, were approached by Shay and their partners about the Marina Business Park that they are proposing to build in the open mixed use space behind the theater and promenade. And the brick building, but they really want to, it's a whole bigger development than that they want to put in. And I'm just wondering, yeah, I think more of it, two questions, I guess. Have the discussions come to you yet? They had talked about how they were going to come to you and to discuss how to bring that into the formal planning process, number one. And then number two, and I think maybe this is my role as a planning commissioner. When something like that comes forward and the developer reaches out on something that is not even in the system yet. So like the dunes is in the system and they want you to come out and view something and think about it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Can't commit to anything. It's nice. It's just information. What becomes our obligations?
So I've had some talks, not anything really concrete in the last several months. Your role as commissioners at any time in the development review process is if you do choose to take that meeting to number one, never say, oh, I think this is a horrible project, or yes, I'll absolutely vote for it. Your role as a commissioner is to keep an open mind. So if you do choose to take that meeting, you have to make that very clear at the beginning of the meeting to say, hey, I'm here just to listen. I'm not committing to anything. I need to go to the public hearing with an open mind. And then at the public hearing, you need to disclose that you had that contact and that, whatever information was shared, that you're able to share that with the rest of the commission. That is your role at any time, and as long as you're a commissioner.
Okay, so we've gone through the whole list. And if there's no other comments, we're going to adjourn.
Great. Yeah.